I'm here at Freedom to Connect with Tim Nulty. Tim, can you introduce yourself?
My name's Tim Nulty, Timothy to be formal. What's my background? I have a very long and checkered career. I have a PhD in economics from Cambridge University. I started as an academic. I found that very boring. Came back to the United States, worked for the United States Congress for a long time. Then I worked for the World Bank for 10 years. I left the World Bank, became a venture capitalist for a while. That was successful, and I also worked for a while as the senior financial advisor to Bill Richardson when he was Secretary of Energy, and then retired back to my home state of Vermont, where I was dragooned into attempting to repair a then failing municipal telecom project in Burlington, Vermont, which was near where I live. And that was successful, so now it's no longer failing, it's quite successful. But a year ago, Burlington is the largest city in Vermont. It's not very big, 40,000 people. It's the biggest thing we got in Vermont. And it is a city-like place. And doing municipal fiber-to-the-home telecommunication in cities is now well understood. I mean, that you can do it, that it's successful or can be successful if properly managed is pretty well established. But I come from a rural part of Vermont, and nobody has ever, to my knowledge, successfully built universal fiber-to-the-home in a rural environment. And a number of small towns have come to me and said, we really want to do this because we fear that our communities are dying and will die without modern communications. And this is a desperate matter for us. This is not a joke. This isn't about gaming. This is about surviving. And are you willing? Do you think we can do it? And if you do think we can do it, can you help us? And I said, yes, I do think you can do it. And that's a really exciting thing to work on. And so that's what I'm working on. And the more we've done a huge amount of homework, engineered the network really down to the very fine point, done a great deal of work on the economics of it and so forth. And it's absolutely clear now that we can financially and technically do universal fiber-to-the-home networks in one of the most rural parts of the United States, and therefore everywhere else too.
So where do all the people who say that it's not financially viable get it wrong?
Well, partly, mostly the people who say that are incumbents who have a vested interest because they don't want to do it. They want to milk their copper as long as they can, and they don't want to be told to overbuild their own copper networks. And so they say it's impossible. Canal owners in the 19th century resisted railroads with exactly the same argument, and railroads resisted interstate highways and attempted to stop the construction of municipal airports with exactly the same argument. I mean, any monopolist who's sitting on a sweet deal wants to be able to milk that without being pushed to build something more. So they have a vested interest in saying it doesn't work. They said, and nobody else knows what he's talking about. So most quote experts listen to the incumbents, and that they say what they heard at the last conference where a paper was presented by a think tank hired by Verizon to say what Verizon wants. And that's the way opinions, what everybody thinks, get spread. They're started by people who have a vested interest in saying something that isn't true, and it gets spread because most people know what they're talking about and say whatever they heard at the last conference or at the last cocktail party. So I'm sorry if that's cynical, but it's the truth.
So, there is a fundamental difference between doing this in Burlington, which is essentially an urban area, and doing it in a very disaggregated geography.
Yes. So it does cost more.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost much more. And counterbalancing it is the fact that you can charge more money. Most rural people understand it costs more, and they're willing to pay some reasonable percentage more. And in our case, as an overbuilder, we have almost no competition out there. We get far better penetration and take rate. So in an urban area where we overbuild, the city of Burlington overbuilt the networks of the incumbent telephone company, Verizon, and the incumbent cable company, Comcast, both of which already covered the town completely. And so when we built, we were coming in with the third network. And we're getting around 45 to 50% penetration in the areas where we've been in place for 3 years. And we'll eventually get up to 60 or 65. But it's a harder push because there's already some kind of broadband, inferior, but it's there. In the rural areas, yeah, it costs more, and I'll go into the cost in a minute, but the people have nothing but bad dial-up. So we'll get them all. We'll get 60 or 70% penetration in 18 months. And that changes the economics immensely. It doesn't completely counterbalance the extra cost, but it significantly and the piece it doesn't, we'll charge 10% or 15% more than the Burlington price. And we're the only ones, there's nothing. So not only will people pay it, they'll be delighted. And it made it quite clear. I mean, we've got 25% of the population pre-registered.
Okay.
So, when you actually get down in the numbers are...
So what territory would this network cover exactly?
It covers a territory, we say 22 towns, but in Vermont they really mean townships. So it's a territory. It doesn't necessarily mean an actual urban agglomeration.
Okay.
In a lot of these towns, you can stand in the middle of the town and look around and you will see no buildings, maybe a couple of barns and some cows, but it's not a town.
So it's really fiber to the farm for the most part.
Fiber to the farm, absolutely. Yeah. Fiber and the average
you
is
need to quote
roughly
new term,
1,000.
FTTF.
Yeah. It's roughly 1,000 square miles, total population of 55,000, about 23,000 potential customers, including business, and an average density, 1,600 miles of inhabited road, 42,000 poles to be attached to, and roughly an average density of, divide 23,000 by 1,600, it's 13 and a half, which is rural by any standard.
And so you have a